So here, let's start out with this one right here, this map. A lot of very interesting maps, some of them relevant, some of them irrelevant and should be rendered irrelevant. But this is a very relevant map, size, proportion, and all of that, of the continent that is called Africa. The continent today, geopolitically, according to the Western Anglo-American and this world order, has been renamed into Africa. Right? So politically, geopolitically speaking, we'll speak in these terms, but yet let's keep the bigger picture, the proper name in mind. Ethiopia, Tobia, Tob, good. Right? Tobiah or Tobijah actually means that God is good, or that Jah is good. An ancient name, the Tob means good. The good land, this land, the good land. So when we look at Africa or the continent, it's a good land. But here, this is speaking about the greater continental agenda. We call it the greater continental agenda. But now I'm speaking to the peoples so they can grasp it. Greater Africa. What do we mean by greater Africa? Right? Parentheses, Ethiopia. Right? Greater Africa. Why on our maps, right, and our outlines, looking at the strategic goals and where our interests, our ancient, historical, our heritage, our indigenous interests actually lay, right? As they said, where they lay. Some say lie, but no, we're going to get out of the lies. We have to overcome the lies, right? We have to expose, we overcome them by exposing them. So right here, we see the content, we see the artificial borders, but we also see Arabia. So why on the maps we need to focus, especially in this 21st century, and for the posterity, on the greater Africa. All right, what do we mean by greater Africa? So this is how we're going to initially launch it. And the initial initiative is greater Africa. What do we mean by greater Africa? Right? On a lot of the maps, when you see a lot of the maps, they usually just have Africa just cut out. On a lot of the maps that we would refer to or see, if you just look up Africa, you'll just see the continent cut out. So this is why we start out here with this one right here to show the greater Africa, right? The greater Africa. Now it's interesting because we look at the OAU, right? The Organization of African Unity, spearheaded by Holy Ethiopia. Say Holy Ethiopia, right? That remnant of ancient Ethiopia with our Judeo-Christian heritage. And I got to point that out because the historical fact, there's people who would dispute, there's a lot of confusion. There's Babylon. Babylon has been causing a lot of confusion. For example, just look at these artificial borders. Who set these artificial borders? Who renamed the continent, right? Who has divided up the continent, right? Or the mainland, right? From Far East Africa. So when we look at Arabia is actually Far East Africa. They'll say, well, Arabia is Arabia, right? So each of these areas are particular areas of study, and many of us have gone into some deep research, on these various different subject matters, like Arabia. Where does this idea come from? Who really is a so-called Arab? What's the ancient Ethiopian connection with Arab? Were they black people? Were they just Ishmael? Is Ishmael the progenitor of the Arabs? Or has Ishmael become an Arab? You know what I'm saying? So who is Esau, right? Is Esau the so-called white man? Or is Esau some of the so-called pale red Arabs? When we look at genealogy, when we sort of study history, right, and accurately, and not just from a Western European perspective, but take the Western European perspective, since we can go into the libraries, we can go into the archive, and a lot of the information out there, for Google Books and everything else, if you do the research, you'll find that it's a lot of European, historians, scholars, archaeologists, all these titles they have, but it's a lot of, from a white people's perspective, a latter-day white people perspective, do we, first of all, begin from here, where we are at now, but in getting to the roots, right, and studying our divine heritage, our ancient, to disseminate our ancient culture and heritage. Greater Africa must be a focus. Of Greater Africa, Far East Africa. And we say Far East Africa, we are including Arabia. Now, some discussion needs to be had on the plates, the plates, the tectonic plates, the plates that, the plates that are under, we could say under the surface, right? So there's this, what they call the African plate, and then some call it the Asian plate. Now we look at the linguistics, the language, right? The scriptural, the biblical. When we look at the Judeo-Christian heritage, we have to note that the Judeo-Christian heritage, it begins, or in a sense emanates, as it were, from black peoples, right? From black and brown, what we could say is African peoples, right? Ancient. When we say ancient African peoples, this is somewhat of a misnomer, because we know that the continent and the people were renamed, right, to that, especially since the Berlin, so-called Berlin Conference. Oh, no, Belgium. I keep saying Berlin, probably the bees, but Berlin has a lot to do with what we have to do with. But first of all, let's just talk about Belgium, the Belgium Conference. Since the Belgium Conference of the 1800s, this is where the continent was carved up. This is the popular narrative. The popular narrative is that Berlin Conference, at the Belgium Conference, Slika, right? At the Belgium Conference, at the Belgium Conference in the 1800s, right? The so-called European colonialists, colonizers, so-called imperial, but Christian, white European Christian nations. Now, we call this counterfeit Christianity, first of all. Many of y'all know the whitewash. This is long after the whitewash, because even Christianity, or the Christian faith and the profession in Africa, we can see from the remaining ardent facts, was also black as well. Right? So this is a very interesting paradigm, that we have to deal with. So just to get an overview, this is an overview, right? So Greater Africa for the 21st century, right? Spearhead forward, we need to look at it as Greater Africa. Now, it's true. We have many maps, and over here, especially amongst the once lost, now found black and brown people, we identify us as the Beta Israel of the West. Right, the royal order of the Ethiopian Hebrews, the Beta Israel of the West. Those peoples brought over here 400 plus years ago to the Americas and the Caribbean. Now, we also know and recognize many indigenous peoples that we can also identify as so-called black peoples, indigenous peoples over here in the Americas and the Caribbean, even prior to the 400-year, the 400-year Holocaust. Because for us, it's a Holocaust, for the black and the brown people over here, right? Recognizing that other people have their own, right? But we're speaking about our interests, our primary interests. So the Greater Africa, so the Lion of Judah Society, LOJ, right? And I, Rasiadonis, Rastafari, and I, Chabarim, and the brothers and sisters, we're seeking to spearhead this Greater Africa and do more research and have dialogue. Let's begin a conversation on what do we mean by the Greater Africa, and why is it important for us to up our, level up, like up our knowledge, our information, intelligence, and to level up for the 21st century and beyond, in order to unify and achieve the aims and objects of our predecessors, right? They have laid that foundation, right? So when we go to the foundation of those before us, let's bring this up right here. You can see we actually had gathered a variety of maps. Of course, don't have time to get into the full, right here. But now here we're looking at the OAU. On the OAU map, Organization of African Unity, of course, Africa and Madagascar are focused on, right? It says, to whom more is given, more is required, but also to whom more has been done to and done against, more needs to be done for and in favor of. So this is why the epicenter is what's called continental Africa, and it's also inclusive, get this, of Madagascar. Right, so when we say that we should include the Far East Africa, i.e. Arabia, on the maps, as we showed just previously in the first 8 or so minutes of this, the vlog here. Those checking out the audio, please check out the vlog so you can see the visuals, the slides as well. So on this slide right here, we get to see one of the OAU's logos also being used by the organization that in a sense has been reinvented, right? And that organization that has been reinvented is known nowadays as the African Union, right? Now, in speaking of the African Union, so we're saying this map right here, or this outline right here, is phase one. This is phase one. All right, this was phase one. The OAU represents phase one. Kadamawi Haile Selassie, Kwame Nkrumah, and other such revolutionary leaders, right, represent the phase one. Right, the phase one. All right, so this is not so much to just look back to the past, but to summarize, right, the success, right, the points that we can build on, right, that which we need to strengthen, right, and that which we just need to disseminate the basic information of, because a lot of this has become visual. You know, like in social media now, a lot of things have become visual. You just see pictures, right? But our understanding, our understanding, our overstanding. So here, once again, we have the Africa Union, right, formerly known as the Organization. We still think that name is very important. Organization of African Unity. So African Union makes us think that, well, the organization, organizing an organization of African unity has been successful. It's somewhat of a misnomer, but we have to build from, you know, we have to deal with where we're at right here to get to where we seek to go, right? So right here, the African diaspora, 6th region, the African diaspora, 6th region. I don't know how much ones in this audience here, we know our audience is very informed, you know, and seeks to be informed, right? And I give thanks for the comments, the updates, and the sharing and the correspondence that is going on. And now pointing to the African diaspora, right? We, as the African, we are identified over here in the Americas and the Caribbean as the African diaspora. Now, our interests, once lost, now found, black and brown sheeple of the beta Israel. We are beta Israel of the West. Some might say Hebrews, some might say Israelites, some of us might say black Jews, but as an overall, right, as an overall beta Israel, we are beta Israel as our brothers and sisters in Ethiopia, East Africa, also in the present state of Jezreel, the state of Israel. We are beta Israel. So often when people hear of beta Israel, or even black Jews, you may say the black Jews of Africa, the black Jews of Ethiopia. That's one of the diasporic, or we can say that's one of the communities around the world, right? But beta Israel, as they identify themselves as beta Israel, also there's a name Falasha. Now what's interesting about the name Falasha, if we go to the Gu'as, and how the Gu'as, right, a Shemitic language, links with Hebrew, biblical Hebrew, that is called Afro-Semitic. Note this, that the language of the Bible, the Judeo, we could say Christian, Hebrew, Israelite, the language Hebrew, or Yehudit, but called Hebrew, Ivrit, right, is Afro-Semitic, just like Amharic of Ethiopia is Afro-Semitic, and many other linguistics and languages of the continent called Africa, especially east of the River Nile, also are Afro-Semitic, or they may say Afro-Asiatic, Afro-Hamito, Ham, like Ham, Ham, Kam, like Ham, Kemet, Kemito-Semitic, right, Semito-Hamitic, you know, languages. So this means that at the very root, because the beginning is the word, right? In the beginning is the word. So we have this Latter-day Christian and Jewish tradition that some say has been hijacked, right, by the Latter-day comers to the faith, you know, who have hijacked the faith, you know, whitewashed the faith, who have corrupted the faith, so forth and so on. But that's also a related subject matter there. But the nowadays, when we talk about Jewish and Christian, usually people, the first view that will come to mind, if I say Jesus Christ, the first picture that will come to mind usually is of Caesar Borgia's of a whitewash. When I say Christian, the first idea ones will get is of so-called Europeans, right, or white people, white Europeans. If I say Jew or Jewish, the first thing one will get is of Eastern European, you know, Ashkenazi or Khazari and so forth and so on. This is the picture that would often come to mind. You know, this is the view. So we have to be honest with, you know, what it is that we see, even though we know we need to change the picture. We need to change our view. We need to improve our view. This is what this particular vlog is about, because as we continue to look around and reason and work and co-labor with others, this subject matter, and some of y'all know we've been reasoning with a few of ones and ones on this before. You know, how we need to include, you know, the so-called, you know, the Arabian, I guess they would call it the Arabian Peninsula or whatnot, but the Arabian part of it. And this is for our inclusion as the sixth region. Finally saw the connection, how this all connects right here, right? How it all connects, the sixth region. See here, the African Union has recognized or identified, at least those in the Americas, you know, at least in America, as you see the United States flag, you know, there as the sixth region. Why is this so? Well, here the AU 6th region uniting the African diaspora. And we will submit this right here, front and center. As with the unity, right, and the first stages of uniting and freeing up the continent from colonialism, the ravages of white supremacist, white racism, white colonialism in the continent of Africa, it began, or it came together, let's put it like this, it came together, right, in the East. It came together in Ethiopia. It came together with one who is identified as an Ethiopian Hebrew from a Judeo-Christian, the Israelites of Ethiopia heritage, right, that was able to unite, bring it together, and initiate this great, right, this great work, and also have great success along with other African leaders, you know, other patriotic leaders, the Kwame Nkrumahs. And of course, I'm speaking of Kedemawi Haile Selassie, the conquering lion of the tribe of Judah, the root of David. Of course, I'm speaking about Kedemawi Haile Selassie of Ethiopia, right? And this is why he is so controversial among certain ones and ones on many different sides, right? Many different sides. We're not talking about personal opinions, you know what I mean? But when we start to talk about strategy, we start to talk about success, we start to talk about work, what really has been done. A lot of ones want to slander, name call, and blame Haile Selassie the first. They want to blame Haile Selassie first, right? Instead of giving due credit, right, where credit is truly and properly due. But this brings us here to the work that we have. As he says, he will be, was succeeded, by the oncoming generation, right? And we are that oncoming generation right here. So the sixth region of the AU, of the African Union, and we can say of African unity, is us, is the Beta Israel. Once lost, now found, is us over here. And if we are going to unite the African diaspora, then the Israelite, right, the Beta Israel, right, conscious black people over here have a significant role to play in that, a significant role, because there's also another point of reference is We the Black Jews, right, by Dr. Ben Yohanan or Jochannan. That's also going to become a point of reference, because as we look into that book and some of the historical pictures and articles and clippings, we can put together the previous work, a lot of things that have gone under the radar. We don't really know many of the things that we should know that our ancestors have done or even attempted to do, and maybe were somewhat successful, right, but did not have enough support, did not have like the social media, did not have ability to really coordinate. So those things were not fully successful, but they were successful in their being born and their being created. And what we need to do is to pick it up, as I say, pick it up, put it back, right? Or pick it up and put it forward, right? So AU, the sixth region, uniting the African diaspora, that speaks to us over here in the Americas. And this is why it's important to see the COINTELPRO that has crept in. We see that's creeping in among several of the One West groups, the Israelite, the Hebrew Israelites, ISU, PK, and other such groups that sometimes seem to put a barrier between us and the continent. We don't have to regurgitate this. Those who are familiar with it know what we're speaking about and also know more of the details and some of the particulars. Others, if you don't know, then hopefully, stay tuned, and there's other opportunities to, catch up. But here, in speaking about the greater Africa and why on our maps, Africa plus Asia, we should include plus Asia when we're speaking about especially us in what is called the sixth region, uniting the sixth region. Why? Why are we saying that? Because this is our interests. This is our interests. This is our divine heritage. Now note right here we have the regions in Africa. So when we talk about the sixth region, the question should be, okay, what are the other 5 regions? It's a good question. Here's the other 5 regions. We have North Africa, what is called North Africa, what is called West Africa, what is called East Africa, what is called Central Africa, and what is called Southern Africa. Now here is where the proverbial rubber meets the road, right? And our focus on this at this stage is on the intel, on information gathering, and making intel out of the information. In other words, gathering the information, reviewing this, having conversations on this, doing further research on this, right? And coming to some sort of a summary on this, and hopefully an agreement, or even if we disagree, we can at least articulate what the disagreements are and maybe what some of the what's the word I'm looking for, some of the what more we need to do to come to an agreement. So let's point out, okay, you say this, you all say this based on this, we're saying that this is not really correct because this. Let's put this down, let's document this. Right? Because maybe we're not able to fully, come to an acceptable conclusion, when we have disagreements about certain things. But once it is there, our posterity and others can follow up, as we are also following up and must follow up on the works of those before us. So this here is the five regions. Right, the 5 regions. Before we get there, right, let's just focus on the 5 regions. So this helps to simplify. This helps to simplify the continental view, right, of the regions in Africa. Now, when this here says right here, uniting the African diaspora and the 6th region, and seeing the United States flag, right, it would make one say, well, the United States is not really in this, is not in Africa in that sense. Yes, there's the United States of Africa, and we need to give Dr. Malaku Emmanuel Bayan, right? Dr. Emmanuel Bayan, Malaku Emmanuel Bayan. We could say like the founder, well, we even say even the co-founder, because it's a, what they call it again? It's like a trinity. It's His Majesty Kinamawi Haile Selassie, who we give the primary credit and due, with the founding of the Ethiopian World Federation Incorporated. Secondarily, Dr. Malaku Emmanuel Bayan, right? And thirdly, our ancestors. Even though we know our ancestors spearheaded it, but it needed to be received, and it was well received, right? Well received by the conquering line of the tribe of Judah, His Imperial Majesty Haile Selassie, elect of God, King of Kings of Ethiopia. And he sent forward Dr. Malaku Emmanuel Bayan, who married one of our sisters, a Judahite, so-called, they say Black American or Negro woman, but a Judahite, if we look at it in our heritage, and also studied at Howard University. So he has fellowshiped and knew our people and was intimate with our people, and we intimate with him. Right? Are ye not as the children of the Ethiopians unto me, O children of Israel? Even the Bible, the prophecy says that they shall come over, right? Come over to I and I. The Ethiopians, the Sabians, our brothers and sisters, from the East, right? So here, this is a simplified, this is kind of a better view, because otherwise we're looking at what the Belgium conference did. or at least what the Belgium conference started. And we look at it today and we see there's 54 countries. So we can either look at 5 regions on the continent. The 6th region, what would the 6th region be? Some of those present leaders at the African Union have included us over here in the Americas as the 6th region. While many of us now give thanks for that, but now we're looking at our heritage over there. All right, now, it's true we have different thoughts, different ideas among our people. We're not a so-called monolith, we black people over here in the Americas. I'll say that again and make this a quote if you need to. We black peoples over here in the Americas and the Caribbean are not a monolith, right? And there's not just one piece of stone. So there's many different, there's many different peoples. We see the majority, right? Not the majority, the overall of us are under the Beta Israel prophecies. Right? Now, there's other peoples. Yes, there are other black peoples. But when we talk about this 400-year heritage and history, it identifies with our interests. And our particular region, right, is this region over here. Right? The region that you see in the gray. Right? The so-called gray area. Right? Our region is the gray area. Now, of course, one will say, but this region has been claimed and has been claimed by other peoples. We say maybe Arabic-speaking people, some of them Islamic people, but not all the Arab people are Islamic, just to note that for the record. But yet the majority movement that's currently going on now, right, we can say is heavily influenced by the religion of Islam, right? So this whole region, is the hot spot, right? The Middle East, the epicenter. Why do you think the Middle East is such an epicenter and a hot spot? And why do you think we as black and brown people are also an epicenter and a hot spot? So you talk about region 6, right? You expect that region 6 means that, well, we're a region on the continent, but we're a people that were taken from the continent, and we were also taken from our lands, right? This is one reason why we speak about east of the River Nile, east of the River Nile, right? And we look at east of the River Nile. Some other maps can bring it out a little bit better, but just to show this for now right here. And look at the key. You see the key on the side? The key on the side, color key, says Northern Africa, Western Africa, Central Africa, Eastern Africa, Southern Africa. And you can see that's 5. There's 5. So this right here now shows us those countries, those modern day artificial nation states. Let's refer to it as that, because then the prophecy will come out so much more. Nation states. These are nation states that have been largely created, the majority of them created by the European, and even those that were not created by the European, right, have been affected by the white Europeans. I have to say white Europeans because in our study of history, not all people who could be called, quote, Europeans were white. Just as they say black African. You notice how they do that, right? Black African, right? That means if there's a black African, there must be not black Africans, like white African, like the Afrikaners, right? So I'm not gonna say the same way, but in the original way, right? Not all Europeans were white people. I'm going to say white Anglo-Saxon Protestant. Most folks don't even, they're in the cognitive dissonance, don't think that, well, if it's a white Anglo-Saxon Protestant, why would they call themselves white Anglo? There must be some black. Are there black Anglo-Saxon Protestants? Right? So when they say black Africans, you have to ask, well, black Africans? So what other kind of Africans? Or there's some other kind of Africans? Well, yes, today. Today there is. So here, the 5 regions and the countries within the particular 5 regions, right? Another way of looking at the regions as well, right? So what we're seeking to link right here when we talk about Greater Africa, right? Greater Africa, once again, is this area that they have in white over here. You see that area they have in white. Now, some black people, some of the scholars, some of the people out there, even in social media, they'll be like, oh, we just need to focus on Africa and black people. And that there is not Africa. Some try to cut so-called Far East Africa, or what is called Arabia today, right, away from Africa. And I don't know how many of you know about the Suez Canal. Do you know anything about the Suez Canal? Right. So those who seek to separate so-called Asia or Arabia and Asia from Africa are basically willing dupes in the white supremacist, white racist agenda, in what basically is a 400-year downpression, psychobabble, Babylon, keep us confused and backward agenda, right? Divide and conquer, kind of a divide and conquer us agenda. But it's true that when we look at present day Africa, with the exception of a few peoples and a few of those in a few of the areas or regions, they don't have direct interest in what we have direct interest in. See, this is one of the reasons why we look at the Israelite, the black Israelite movement. I have to call it black, but just to define the Beta Israel. Without having to call it black, we'll just say Beta Israel. Yes? Right? But we also identify it as black, because we proud to be black, right? So Beta Israel, right? The Beta Israel movement. The Beta Israel movement is not only those, we say, black Jews of Ethiopia that have been called Falasha. We truly, in this sixth region, we are the real Falashas. Falasha come from the Gutters. I meant to finish up that point earlier. Falasha come from the Gutters, Falesa. And there's also there's Hebraic links to that. But Falesa, right, means to be exiled, right? We were totally exiled, moving from east throughout Africa, from East Africa through the Sahel to West Africa, right? In some cases, initially by our own volition, right? Later on, leading up to the enslavement trade across the Ethiopian ocean slave trade, not through our volition, right? Forced. So the black people that were enslaved and put into ships and brought across the Ethiopian ocean to the Americas and the Caribbean, right, did not all originate just in West Africa. Some originated in Central Africa. Some originated in the lower regions of North Africa. You see how some regions right there go into Chad, I think in Sudan, roughly, right? You see right over here, you see how they split it up very funnily right there with the green, right? And even some from East Africa, right? And no doubt some also from South Africa, right? No doubt, right? So they came from all points. It was an all points enslavement, because we had lived in, our people, even they still live there, but have lived in, and also when after 70 AD had fled to various parts of the continent, and also to various parts of Arabia. But see, when we're speaking about that, we're speaking about a history over roughly 2,000 years, right? At least within the AD time, right? But there's also the BC connections of our people, who many of the descendants are in the sixth region, with those who are on the continent, and especially in the East Africa region, and even in parts of the North Africa region, and even in parts of the Central Africa region, and even parts of the Western Africa region, and also the Southern Africa regions. So this really concerns all of us, but it's our direct interest, those of us who are in this Region 6, the sixth region diaspora, the sixth region diaspora. So, of course, one might say, well, where would our lands be? We can point to simply Genesis chapter 15. We can point to Genesis chapter 15, from the river to the river. Let's put it like that. We'll get into details on the follow-up. From the river to the river. That means the river of Ethiopia, the river Nile, right? The river of Inner Africa, right, to the river Euphrates, right, the river Euphrates, right? And see, a good understanding of these maps and who's who and where's where, as we studying even the scripture and the Bible, will bring out the true interpretation. This is one reason why, so many ones can try to make the Bible seem as though it's irrelevant, because they have superimposed their misinterpretations and interpolations and a lot of false data, false, fake news and fake information, right? And disinformation, and a lot of propaganda that has confused ones, so they're not seeing the clarity of the scriptural, of the biblical view, right? So this also is our interest. Although when we're speaking concerning Greater Africa, right, we can speak concerning the geopolitical situation today, but we are being informed, right, by our historical, biblical, cultural, heritage, ancestral knowledge and information. This is why it's important to have that information, so that when these subject matters come up and we like see a news story today, we can go into the point of reference and be able to discern, you know, what the trick is. Because a lot of times there's a trick. It's a trick, you know. They have a lot of interesting and clever tricks, you know. Like note this right here. This is another example of a trick right here. Now you see the regions are basically the same. Let's count them for a moment. You see there's like a fuchsia, and there's like a purple, and there's a fuchsia in East Africa over here. Notice that. Are they trying to divide? Notice this right here. Now if we count the regions, North Africa, West Africa, Central Africa, 3, right? East Africa, Southeast Africa, 3, 4, 5, Southern Africa, 6. Now Madagascar obviously comes into, according to this map here, the Africa G8200 map. Madagascar, because of similar purple color, would obviously be identified with Southeast Africa. But note, there's 6 regions here. Now, we're not saying that this necessarily is incorrect, but the but that was in the United Nations. No, but the African Union and others working from over here in the diaspora have already identified the 6th region. Now, some would say, well, the East Africa and Southeast Africa is the same, but then the color nuance and the difference in name points out a difference. Is this a divide and conquer? Is this a trick? Or if it's not, then the African Union and those who are doing dialogue and conversation on our behalf with the African Union definitely need to update this. Something needs to be updated, right? Because that means that we will be region 7. In fact, many of us will prefer to be region 7. You know, something about the numbers and the number 7, right? Region 7. It will probably make more sense, region 7. But so that's another point that we can clarify. Right? But right now we have the region 6. We are identified over here in the diaspora in the Americas, especially as region 6. But we like to extend that to those black peoples in the Americas, not just in North America. I think that's the epicenter, but also our brothers and sisters in the Caribbean, and also our brothers and sisters in Central America, and also in South America. We need to identify. So here is the Africa Political, right? Politique, right? Political right here. So once again, now you see how this compares with the next one? Even the borders are different. So there seems to be some dispute or perhaps perspective, because some of these, you know, have been made by various different people. So also we're going to have to, you know, verify the chain of custody. You know, the chain of custody. Okay, this map right here, who has made this region? Because if you notice here, Sudan is included in East Africa, right? Sudan over here, right, is included in East Africa. It's right next to Ethiopia. See, Sudan is included in East Africa. But yet if we go over here, Sudan is included in North Africa. Here, Sudan is included in North Africa, right? Here, Sudan is included also in North Africa, but Southern Sudan, you notice that right there? Look at that detail. You see South Sudan? South Sudan is included in East Africa. But then Sudan itself is really in East Africa. So you see how these nuances right there. Now, there's a whole story behind this right here, because South Sudan, those in South Sudan, let's put it like this. Those in South Sudan don't identify themselves as Arabic speaking people, right? Now, the original Arabs from our study and research were heavily melanated black people, not so much like the popular view of Arabs we see today, right? Even if we go back to the time of Saudi Arabia, I was looking at some historical footage and video, King Faisal and different ones. I said, man, he had a lot of dark-skinned black people around him. He had a lot of black people. Even the movie Lawrence Arabia, right? But then if you know the history, those who had supported the Saudi family in their like takeover, later on, you know, they were killed. Yeah, it's historical, you know. There's a Adam Curtis film, Bitter Lake. Bitter Lake. If you want to see more, very interesting film. Maybe you could see it one sitting, or look at a part of it and then look at it, you know, look at it piecemeal. You might have to do that, pause on some areas, take notes and reason. Come, make a reason. It's called Bitter Lake. It's by Adam Curtis. You'll see it on YouTube. Bitter Lake by Adam Curtis. Right? If you look at that video, you see King Faisal and some of the other, I think his father and other ones, you know, who are part of the whole Saudi, you know, Arabia, when they came up in the oil business and everything else like that. And you'll see around him, even some of his bodyguards, right, are Arabs, are black Arabs. Now some might say, oh, these are Africans, like black Africans who were converted to Islam, because they don't know the history of East Africa. They really don't know that many of these people, even many of the Sudanese, the Mahdiya, and these families, they can trace their lineage, right, all the way back to the Prophet, you know, Muhammad, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. You know what I mean? Also many of the people in the Horn of Africa, right? So that means that these people also, you know, were what they are today, yesterday, before, and going all the way back to the beginning of these movements or these religions such as Islam. So I just want to point that out right there, because some people have an idea. I'll say it's the racist, you know, racist European white supremacist idea. You know, like if we say, well, we're Hebrews, we're Israelites, we're Jews, they say, oh no, you're trying to be like the Khazarians or the Ashkenazi Jews. And then I'm reading their books and they say, well, they converted to around 740 AD. I say, wait, hold on for a moment. They converted to 740 AD, and what we see, our heritage and ancestral indigenous links go way before, goes to BC, goes to BC, goes before 740 BC, goes before 740 BC. So how is this? So these are areas, so the information, Lion of Judah originally, right? And it's an initial inception, an information society, IS, information society. We need to get the info, then come make a reason. Let's do our research so we can get intel, right? And if this is true, we can keep this in consciousness. If it's proper, true, right, and accurate. If it's not, we can bun it. Right, we can bun it, and we have to target it. If it's incorrect, if it's inaccurate, it has to be exposed. Right, it has to be, you know, giving a fire burn notice. Yes. So here they split Sudan, right, and this is because some of the latter politics. There was a lot about the Darfur. I think many of you heard about the Darfur and everything. You know, so there's some differences of identification. So it's obvious that Southern Sudan, seeing that they are more predominantly Christian, right, than Muslim, right, and some of their, you could say, tribal links are different than some of the people in the north, their links. In fact, some of the people that were around the black Arabs that were around King Faisal in some of the videos, various different videos that we've seen. I was just watching the video, just watching documentary, and my eye glanced at, this is, you know, those are black men. Are those his bodyguards? And then later on in Bitter Lake documentary, talk about, well, how they were killed off, you know, a little bit later on. So I said, wow, ain't that something? You know, we can follow up on that, hopefully. But yeah, so Southern Sudan, you know, some might say it was racial, because the Northern Sudanese, they identify themselves as not being African. Some say in the sense that they are not, in a sense like black Africans, they consider themselves more of their culture and heritage, links with Arabia. So do different peoples in the Horn of Africa. You know, even when we look at ancient Ethiopia and the Queen of the South, known as the Queen of Sheba, Nigist Makda, or as she's known in ancient Israel as, you know, Ida, or the Queen of the South, Ida, that she ruled on both sides. Her kingdom, right? You know, the kingdom, the Sabians and the ancient Ethiopians, they ruled on both sides of what is referred to as the Red Sea, the Etra Bahir, the Sea of Reeds, or the Yam Suf in the Hebrew, the Sea of Reeds. Right? Now we see Eritrea is a latter-day construct, you know, it's a modern nation state, in the times of the Gentiles. Gentiles mean nations. So the European rulership brought in the times of the Gentiles, because this is where everywhere they go, right, they carve up other people's countries. Whenever they're able to conquer people, they carve up their continents and countries. And we have seen this. And this is what the Bible had prophesied concerning the times of the Gentiles. The word Gentiles, goyim, basically means nation states. Is the operative word. It doesn't apply only to white folks. Some people say it applies to only white folks. It applies to nation states. Basically nation states. Israel is a goy. Israel in the Hebrew Bible is a goy, but it's a kadosh goy. It's a holy nation in singularity, and it's told to not follow after the other goyim, the other nations. Now, of course, there were some nations that they were closer to. We know that's from the scripture, the Bible, related peoples, related nations. Even are ye not as the children of the Ethiopians unto me, O children of Israel. With Ethiopia, this man was born there. These are areas of the scripture that are significant. Princes shall come out of Egypt. Ethiopia shall stretch forth her hands to Elohim. So Ethiopia can stretch forth her hand to the God of the Hebrews and the Israelites. Well, historically speaking, for nearly 3,000 plus years, we've seen that word to be yea and amen, right and accurate, and the history of the Israelites of Ethiopia also prove that. So by speaking about these particular points, these are points that many of us over here in the West, in this 6th region, identify with, right? So what we're saying here is the Greater Africa, right? Greater Africa. And let's actually cut to the chase here in this vlog and vid right here, because this is getting to some of the specifics, right? The specifics, right? But you notice that whenever they're talking about Africa, most times they kind of they want to keep Arabia out of the picture, right? They want, it's like, my brothers and sisters, it's almost like talking about Europe and keeping England out of the picture. Great Britannia. Imagine talking about Europe and European affairs and European history, and past and modern, and keeping Great Britannia out of it. It's in the same way keeping Arabia, what they call Arabia, out of the connection of the continental Africa, because the plates are connected. They try to cut it apart with the Suez Canal. That's why I mentioned the Suez Canal, right? The Suez, so they can have a short way to get from like Europe to India, and to South Africa, and to even to China, for trade, for ancient trade, right? As you can see right here in 1880, this shows like how it was in 1880, right before the Berlin Conference. The continent was not called Africa. I mean, it was not known historically as Africa. Africa was a new way they started to refer to it. But after they cut it up and created all these artificial nation states, the Goyim, the times of the Gentiles, the Europeans, the white Europeans, the colonialists, after they had done that, then that brought us into this phase. So this is for history, for record. You can see how Egypt, this all was controlled, I think, by Britain, Great Britannia. So look at that right here. Great Britannia and other Europeans have influence, and even in some places direct control, in various parts of the continent known by their renaming it as Africa, and they themselves are in countries far off. So see, even our influence, even in this 21st century, we need to consider and even reconsider, even our influence. We might feel as though we're not there, and they say, oh, you got to come to the continent, you have to be here. And it's interesting. Yes, we do. But then we already have, right? So we can still have an influence from where we're at. So don't think like, well, I got to forget about doing anything towards liberation or unity until I can just go there. This is a false view, a faulty view, right? There's many ones and ones that never even laid foot in America, right? But when they were colonizing America or Australia, they gave support and they were working with those who were on those front lines. Same thing that we can do as well, and many of us in small ways presently are doing. Now, Africa kingdoms and empires. This map here needs to be updated because another Africa kingdom and empire should be the Israelites and even Israel, right? And we have some questions about that, the location. right? Because this is why we're mentioning Arabia so much here. Look at the time. Okay, this is almost an hour. This is just like a basic kind of an intro, right? Basic overview. Okay, this is a trade. There's some trade maps, right? This is interesting, some trade maps, right? If you notice, what's left out of the equation here is Israel. And this is because other people also claim, right, our identity, right? In other words, they'll say that we're claiming their identity and we say they're claiming our identity. So we're at a little bit of an impasse, but they have a greater influence. And speaking about the European Jews, Ashkenazi and European Jews, they have a greater influence in the world today, right? And though sometimes they might not identify themselves as white, right, they can also sometimes also. So if you look at the continental situation for us, see, I don't want to be talking about them, right? You know, others, you know, if we make our claims and we can uphold our claims, right? And maintain our claims. We don't have to keep arguing with other people about our claims, right? If any credible, you know, arguments or curious points come up, yes, we can address them. But we don't have to get stuck on that, because we get stuck on that, then we also lose momentum on the big picture and the big work, right? Some of those in the state of Israel are talking about greater Israel project, and there they even have some of their greater Israel maps, you know, linking into the continent. So why should not we have our map connecting into the continent? It's a part of the continent. Arabia is a part of the continent historically, right? Our people groups, right? Even look at the whole Judaic, the Jewish, the Hebrew, Israelite, and even the original Nazarene, the original so-called Christian faith. Yes? So here, the Kingdom of Africa, 1,000 to 1,500. Notice what is not being mentioned. Well, first of all, this is a misnomer, right? This is a misnomer because it's AD 1,000 to 1,500, right? When was the Berlin Conference? We can show you maps of the 1500s. Maps of the 1600s, 17, 1800s. Many of them, majority of them, identifying the continent as Ethiopia. So this really should say kingdoms of Ethiopia or kingdoms of ancient Ethiopia. How about that? I know some of ones are academic and intellectual. So instead of just saying the kingdoms of Ethiopia, the kingdoms of ancient. I'm saying ancient, you know, the ancient past. That's not ancient, but that is technically what is called ancient. All right. So this is the region here, right? That region that's left blank, right? That region that's left blank. African civilizations, 1500. This is another misnomer right here, right? See, what's happening is that they're putting a name on it and they are covering up another name. They say the cover up is worse than the lie. So saying that these were called African civilizations back then when they did not use that terminology, we know where the terminology came from, right? Especially we know the linguistics. A lot of the Europeans also know where the terminology came from, but they often don't like to identify. They like to say probably, maybe, perhaps, you know, in their writings. But those who know the so-called Afro-Semitic languages of that region, such as, you know, you can say the Arabic, such as the Hebrew, such as the Amharic, such as the Ge'ez or Tigrinya, any of those languages of that particular region, understand, if they understand the, you know, etymology of words, you know, and verbs, they understand where that came from. But notice how they keep Arabia in the black. I'm not the black, but like the dark color. Like there's nothing that was going on there. They don't even talk about, they have Aksum, but they have Aksum, well, it does extend over into there, but it's very dubious. It's not directly identified, right? To 700 AD. See, this is a misnomer map too, because here they say BC to AD. So the BC, I would think, is the left hand, which says Africa, kingdoms, and empires. And then the AD 700, I think, is the right hand. But see how they divide it up? See, so here it shows they're lying too. Here it shows how they lie in a very pleasant way. They say 700 AD. These artificial nation states did not exist on the continent as these artificial nation states in 700 AD. You know what I'm saying? 700 AD. Berlin Conference, The Berlin Conference happened about 1100 years afterward. The Berlin Conference that divided up Africa happened 1100 years after 700 AD. Is that correct? 1100, right? 800, right? 900, right? 1000, and then 800 years. So we have 800, 900, 1000, 1100. 1,100 years later with the Berlin Conference. So see how they lie. First I thought that, hey, this is a good map, like showed before the borders, after borders. Now here in doing this and reading the caption here where it says African civilization. How can you call it African civilization? This is what they call anachronistic. Anachronistic. That, like, it's like putting something in the wrong time. Like the wrong time. Now you see they love to do this right here. Islamic Caliphate. So they try and say, well, the Islamic, which came up around 600 AD, rule all of this. All right? This is a misnomer. These are misnomers. All right? These are great misnomers here. All right, let's go to this right here. We're going to sum up right here. Some on the Garden of Eden. You know, where's the garden? Where's Eden? Right? We identified the garden as being the continent called Africa. Right? But it says eastward in Eden. That means it had to include Arabia. So where it says over here the Shemites and Mount Zion right here, this all was a part of greater Africa. So we're saying that where it says Mount Zion up there, let's see if we can get a clearer, what you call them. Where it says Mount Zion over here, where you see the Euphrates barely right over here, right? And you see where it says Elam, Madai, Elam, Persia, right? All of this was a part of this. All of this was a part of the Aden. We even have the Gulf of Aden right over there with Aksum and Yemen, right? Aksum and Yemen, right? And the Hamites didn't just stay within these, the Africa as they like to make you believe, and the so-called Shemites didn't just stay within the borders of Arabia. That's the white man's view. He was trying to understand, and some things that he understand, he caused other people to misunderstand it because it did not go along with his interests, his political, geopolitical, economical interests, his colonial interest at the time, right? And see the Ham. You see what it says Ham and Shem? But we have the languages. Key languages of the Abrahamic religions that are basically a combination of these two people groups. So now, how does that come about? How do two peoples speak one language? See, it's the European, what they call divide and conquer. Was that divide et impera? That's what the Romans said, divide et impera. Divide and conquer. It's a divide and conquer this. And then play colorism and color games, all kind of games they have played on us during the times of this ignorance, right? But now we're called to think differently, right? Now we're called, this is even a little clearer map right here, right? So even Mount Zion, right? Even Mount Zion, Arabia is all a part, right? We could say what some might call the old Mount Zion, and the new Mount Zion is all a part and parcel of what is referred to as Africa. Therefore, once again, to our proposal of, especially to the Ethiopian Hebrews and to the Israelites, our Israelite brothers and sisters, you know what I mean? The greater, when we say greater Africa in tune with the sixth region, and also in tune with us and our interests of the promised land. We have many of our people who have gone over there, especially from America, like the African, the African, what's the name that they refer to themselves, Jerusalem. Well, I know the Kingdom of Yah. I know them as the Demona, the Kingdom of Yah, right? KOY, the Kingdom of Yah community. They have gone over there, Ben Ami community, and also other communities have settled over there from different parts of, we could say, the continental Africa, but also those of us from the diaspora, have gone over, have settled. Some are even currently living right over in the state of Israel. Now, even the state of Israel, some people say that's what the white people did and the UN did. And yes, they did those things, but we can show and prove our prior involvement as well as our prior interests, where black people like us identifying with the claims of Israel had prior interests over there, which is recorded and documented, and therefore can even put on the record that, well, they basically just took this from us, like so many other things, jazz, hip hop. Notice they talk about black history, right? Like in America. But actually, everything that's black history in America can also be claimed to be American history. Have you peeped that? So even though it was us, even though when we were so-called by force segregated, like we was put in the corner over here. We like the untouchables over here. But our culture, they love it. They rub it on their chests. But we're the untouchable. Keep the black people over there. But we love their culture. Bring their culture, their music, their inspiration over here. See, this is the same thing. It's nothing new under the sun. Right? Just whether you can see. Right? Whether there's light in your eyes and you can see what is occurring here under the sun. Right? And what can be done. So here, the Ethiopian Ocean, just to kind of show and prove this right here, right? Orientation, right? Have to get reorientated, right? Just a couple of the facts here. Now, some speak about alkebulan, right? Some speak about alkebulan, right? Looking over this right here. Okay, I want to follow up more on this, because this is in some language. I'm picking up on some of it right here. Yeah. So we need to get a translation of this, because some have named it alkebulan. Now, knowing etymology and some of the Afro-Comito-Semitic, Shemitic languages, we can decipher possibles of what alkebulan, kebu is alkebulan. Is it al-Kebu? Is it el-Kebu? Right? And lan, is it lan as in land? Or is it lan as in an ancient part of speech, not the English word land? So we'd like to get a little more on this whole alkebulan thing, because so far we haven't found any primary sources, but this right here looks very interesting. Just as a part of research. Let's put this in the category of research, right? Research. Right? So anyway, brothers and sisters, this was also interesting. Quickly right here, it's kind of blur. We're gonna see if we get a better map of this, right? But it was interesting because down here where it's very blur, I think it says Ethiopia, but Ethiopia is actually positioned further south. This is said to be 1691 map at the top, the 1691 map. Ethiopia, if you can see it right here, you can still see part of it, Ethiopia. Let's go right here, bring it as clear as possible. By that river, Ethiopia, right? Maybe we're misreading it, but it seems so from a distance, right? Further south, right? Also of interest, okay, this is interesting, the Biafra, and heal up, let's pray for our brothers and sisters and, who are suffering persecution, and many of them who do identify with a common heritage. In some parts, in some ways, Hebrew and Israelite heritage. They're going through a fight right here. And notice that they're in the region, Biafra, they're in this region, right, that was called Ethiopia on the map. Let's show this right here. You see where it says no, that's not clear enough right there. We'll see if we can find a clearer map. The clear map says this was the region that the Europeans didn't know too much about. We show that elsewhere as well. Before we get out of this right here, we see this. It was used by Moors, Nubians, Numidians, Card Hadassians, Hadash, Card Hadassian, and Ethiopians. But show us the proof of it. If you're going to say Moors, we know that the ancient Ethiopians, well, we're not going to get into that. We just want to see more proof of it, more proof of it linguistically speaking. Language matters. Language matters a lot. Here's how we can see shifting names in Africa of the continent. called Ethiopia, right? Then the place that was called Africa, just that slither in the north. Then how it went through different names and pre-colonial, before colonizations, different kingdoms that existed. Well, I'd like to show, this is more or less the type of map right here. This is what we mean by showing Arabia as well, right? Especially when in this 21st century, when we're speaking about us in the diaspora, especially us who identify as Beta Israel, right? Beta Israel. You can see this right here where they were able to cut the Suez Canal. And because they cut the Suez Canal in the latter days, they tried to then separate it. This is where, after they cut it, they call this region the Middle East. What they call the Middle East, we refer, in the Royal Order of the Ethiopian Hebrews, we refer as Far East Africa. Far East Africa in present geopolitical and counter geopolitical terms and terminologies. There's another map just to show you. Oh, this is interesting. Etymologies of African currencies, because it's they follow the money. Well, actually, let's direct the money. Let's direct the money. But here's interesting right here, in looking at this, I thought this was of some interest. It says in Angola, the Kwanzaa is actually a denomination of currency. Kwanzaa. Happy Kwanzaa. Okay, so economically, now we the black Jews, we can, as they say, get behind that, so to speak. We can get with that, right? Yes, Kwanzaa is economics, so currency, because these are ways, right? Ways and means of unity and ways and means of liberation, right? We the black Jews, we the Beta Israel over here in the West. There's this, there is this, the science about how big Africa is, which is of some great interest. This is a little clearer map, right? A little clearer map there. Be patient, brothers and sisters. Notice here what it's on the peoples of Africa, right? Now, this is where the confusion comes in, is when they cut off. See, when they cut off Arabia, and they try to make it seem as though, well, those are Shemitic people and all you are Hamites. They play a psychological divide and conquer with us. And when we buy into that, because of the trauma of white supremacy and white racism, it kind of further keeps us. It's a trick and it's a trap. It's a trick and it's a trap. Yes, we embrace this. This is a part of the overall, the big picture. But so is Arabia when we're talking about the sixth region. Right, the sixth region can help to unite us, right, in this continental thing, because then we can see, well, historically, how did we get over here, right? The majority, because the prophecy for us is the Beta Israel prophecy over here, the Beta Israel of the West. Now down here, they have it right here. Peoples and languages are key to this map, right? This is the key to this map, but they leave out Arabia because that is a modern political. It's an agreement. They've made certain agreements. The Saudis and some other people, especially the Saudis and others like them, with the oil powers, they have been able to make the West agree with a lot of things, right? So some things that the West does, even in the educational academic institutions, is influenced by Saudi and Arabia and those peoples over there in that particular region. Well, you see how the whole 9/11 thing, just, how they poured in trillions of dollars into that. The focus, man and might and blood and bullets, and, they put all of that in there. Why? What does the Bible say? For the love of money, the love, not the use, but the love of money is the root of all evil. And the Arabs, or the Saudis especially, they understand that. They understand that. They understand that. So because of that, they're able to have them over a barrel. So that's another follow-up point right there. So some things may not be included in some maps, right? Some things might not be included in some maps, and some places the Arabia will be cut off, right? Because they are all playing a divide and conquer game. And we know the role of certain ones in the guise of whether Islam or Mohammedanism, what they also have done and how they did, is the Islamic, well, they don't like to say Islamic, they like to say Arab slave trade, even though religion or the Islamic religion was also used or misused, you know, but that's a related matter right there. Right, so here it says Africa, Middle East, and Holy Land. What if I was to tell you that Africa, Middle East, and Holy Land is basically, essentially, one land? This is what we're speaking about, Greater Africa. So when we say Greater Africa, we're speaking about Africa, Middle East, and Holy Land. Africa, Middle East, and Holy Land. And it's a re-examine and research of these maps, right? And also looking at history. So this is the view that ones like to, when they say the world as known to the Hebrews, right? The world as known to the Hebrews, right? Well, the world as known to a lot of the people in that ancient time, the world as it was anciently known. And the reason why this part of the world is important is, like it says, according to the Mosaic account. And the Mosaic account originally was, at least as we know, right, recorded, right, in Hebrew. And Hebrew is an Afro-Semitic, Semito-Hamitic, Afro-Semitic language. So that means these two people were not as separated, right, as they make us believe today. They make us believe that these three, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, were at each other's throat and fighting all the time. And it was this worldview today. What they have done is anachronistic. They took the present worldview, right, and they superimposed it on the past, instead of really researching the past to inform us in the present and even into the future. So, brothers and sisters, we must, right, as we move forward, right, include, you know what I mean, Arabia, what's this, Africa, Middle East, and Holy Land, the greater, right, greater Ethiopia, the greater Africa. You know, we're starting out with the greater Africa right now as a nomenclature, a name, right, because ones need more education concerning what we mean, you know, when we say Ethiopia, right? Ones still are not very much familiar with the map. So you see where it says Lake Victoria? On that other map, it has said Ethiopia. That was a 1990 something map, right? Okay, yeah, here we go. This is what we sought to show you. So you see right here, the red line, they say, well, this is the African plate. Now, some call the Nubian plate, as an Arabian plate. Some call the Nubian plate the African plate. So there is the Somalian plate. That means that as you study under the landmass, there's different plates theoretically, and some even predict or prophesy that these things are going to split apart because of the whole Rift Valley, right? East African, right? The Rift system, right? So there's these different basins, depression, and heights, right? So here they're saying, well, there's Arabian plate, Nubian plate, and Somalian plate. Right? We see how the Nubian plate and Somalian plate still bring them together. The Red Sea is all a part of the Rift Valley situation, right? But still, these peoples who lived on one side or the next side were not prevented or forbidden. You know what I mean? So here they try to throw in Asia. They try to say, that's Asia over there. So remember what the Roman strategy was? Divide and conquer, right? Divide and conquer. And also change names. Remember how the Atlantic Ocean was the Ethiopian Ocean? You see how they do those things, right? Because of their interests. Doing it our way does not serve their interests, brothers and sisters. So once again, we should get our people and the babies, you know, used to seeing the overview, right? Remember, it says from the river of Egypt to the river Euphrates. Greater Africa. Give thanks, brothers and sisters. I know we was a little bit long in this one right here. There's a couple more exhibits to be shared. And just before we get out of here right here, let's see if we have any more exhibits. Well, we do have more exhibits. We wanted to touch on some of the economics and the trade, right? There's economics and trade. That's also very, very interesting. Perhaps we can pick up on economics and trade. First, looking at some ancient economics and trade, right? Some ancient economics and trade. Let's put it like this right here, just briefly right here before we get out of this one right here. This was an interesting something. This was a chart right here that we saw that was talking about happiness. it was interesting. Happiness chart, like the places in Africa where people, like the dark is most happy, and the different colors, like the dark is most happy. So when I look at dark most happy, it seems like the south, a couple of places over in the west, right? Ethiopia is in the second quintile, right? And so forth and so on. That was interesting. Some of these kind of maps where, based on some of their researches, and these can help us as we speak about uniting the sixth region, and we as the African Beta Israel diaspora. So we will be like the African, in the political terms, Beta Israel diaspora, right? Or the Beta Israel of the West, concerning the African diaspora. This is also an interesting one right here. Languages of business in Africa, right? So looking at the languages of business in Africa is very, very important, right? Where, what places and where. When we talk about linguistics or business, well, that's the first thing. And that means that even if we're not equipped in one of the languages of one of the places that we are seeking to do business in Africa, on the continent, right? We can always, if you notice that many of the places they deal with, at least English and another language. There's a few places that are strictly one language. English is like, English will probably get you by because of, the popularity of it worldwide. And we black people have had a lot to do with that too. Think about hip hop, think about the culture and things, yeah, right? But this is important to know, right? So then we're going to pick up on more business, right? Because often we might complain, they don't do no business, so we should be doing business. And look, they're doing business with white people, because white people, not just white people, but other peoples, you remember what we have gone through. I'm not saying that we should just be lamenting or get caught up on the ghosts of the past. No, we should not be afraid of the ghosts of the past. Who's afraid of the ghosts of the past? But in moving forward, in order to move forward, these are the areas that we should focus on in our studies. Languages of business in Africa. So hopefully we can have a video where we follow up, do a little more research and follow up on that, right? Over here, regions of Africa by population. This I thought was interesting, from the 50s to 2018, different particular regions of Africa. We can see how all these regions have increased exponentially, in population, right? Then over here, this particular map, okay, which one was this? I think there's another map that we can bring this out right here. This is, okay, the GNP of these countries. This is some of the main natural resources that are found in some of these countries right here. Like how they cut off Arabia. You see how they cut off Arabia? Arabia is part of our interests, we black. And when I say Beta Israel, I'm also including those who might identify themselves as Moors. Let's point that out. Or those, even the Nation of Islam, or Islamic, Arabic, from that Arabic heritage, or ones we call that Moorish heritage. This embraces both of us. Right? If you notice that some of us might be more Hebrews in the sense of Israelites, some might be somewhat more Hebrews in the sense of Islamic or Ishmael. But this also concerns us as well. So these are areas where we can work together for common interests, also for economical, right, benefits, of our respective communities. Also the wealth, looking at wealth in different parts of Africa. If you notice who are the most wealthy, right? The most wealthy, it seems like we're looking at Libya. Ain't that something? The green. This tells us a lot too when we examine other things. Okay, that's what that other map was. Access to electricity. Right? I thought it had a caption or a key on it, but access to electricity, right? This was interesting. Me and my brethren were speaking about this. Notice that all of the countries in the north, in North Africa, have a 99%. Even you look at South Africa down there, it says 94%, the big number. Ethiopia has 47%, right? Eritrea has 47%. Djibouti 42%, Sudan 47%, South Sudan, remember we talking about South Sudan? South Sudan 1%, Somalia 18%. Now remember what Akon had done? by making certain international deals or negotiations, let's put it like that, negotiated and brought, to, I think, Senegal and certain areas over there to his people. All right. So think about how important this is when we talk about electricity access. They're not saying that just electricity, but the access to electricity, right, in Africa. This is wow. This is wow. This is wow. This is really wow. Looking at these numbers here. Ethiopia has 47%, like 47% of the population, you can say, have access, right? But then we look at North Africa, all across North Africa. You're telling me that there's not, geopolitical supremacy and racism things going on? But that should just motivate us, right? That should motivate us. We know those are ghosts of the past. Remember, ghosts of the past, right? Here, who's free and who's independent. Okay. So I think we've kind of summed that up right there. Wanted to share that with you. Was going to use some of these other maps to kind of, like how they, like notice over here, are these states or regions? Okay, here we go, brothers and sisters. All right, so right here, and for us, that center, that key, Ethiopia is that key. Oh, just want to show you this. This was their agenda. This was their agenda. This is how they sought to divide and conquer Africa. All right. This is what would have been if ones like Edamawi Haile Selassie, right, did not rise up. Right, that man-child and others. If the Organization of African Unity, if we over here, we black peoples and our ancestors was not conscious and involved to the level they were involved, this is what they would have done. And where's Ethiopia? This was their agenda. Where's Ethiopia? They would have actually split it. This might speak to the initial British hesitancy in supporting Edamawi Haile Selassie and Ethiopia and Holy Ethiopia in its cause against the Antichrist Roman fascisti. No way you can be of Christ doing those wicked atrocities, period. Against another Christian people who have not attacked you or nothing like that. So this was their intent, right? And when you see that Egyptian, what you call them, don't think that right there is the British influence, right? That's the British influence right there, right? Golden Kingdom of Kemet, right? So the British, the British involved that, but this was their intention. Finally, this is what has been settled on. Now notice all those countries in the north, right? Notice that they have a strong Islamic influence. Right? A strong Islam. Look on their flags. Their flags will tell you everything. Right? Flags will tell you everything. Right? If His Imperial Majesty's agenda and the true agenda for Ethiopia had continued, more than 47% of the population would have access to electricity now. Ethiopia would be 99% electricity if Ethiopia did not fall into the diversion, confusion, the godless creeping coup and conspiracy against His Majesty, and also against Africa progress. If we're going to talk about liberation and progress, what happened is that through the work of His Majesty, Ethiopia started to prosper. A lot of the aims and objects that were set about started to prosper. And it's almost like, we poor, but we all work together. We all put in, and our leaders put in even the most because they had more to put in, right? And now things are prospering, and now everybody is like putting their hand out, want to grab a bag. You know what I mean? You know what I'm saying? And this is what part of what was wrong and done, but that's part of the ghost of the past, and that's not our ghost. That's actually the ghost for certain Ethiopians. Still have to address that amongst themselves, and a lot of what we see going on today, even in geopolitical terms, has a lot to do with it, right? We pray for them. They can ask for our consultation, but some of those things are things that while we were over here and elsewhere, those things were caused over there. You know what I'm saying? While we were over here, right? Our link to His Majesty, links to that 3,000 plus year historical ancestry, And that's an important link for us, especially in the Royal Order of the Ethiopian Hebrews and the LOJ Society. So look at that. So when we're speaking about Beta Israel, when we're speaking on we as Hebrews and we as Black Jews and even as Rastafari Yehudim, right, have to really learn. We have to learn. We have to learn the Torah, laws, statutes, and commandments in the 9 areas of people activity, not from just a religious view. And anybody who understands true Yehudi-net, that's often called, quote, Judaism. You know, we, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, right? This will change things. So somebody say, oh, you shouldn't put religion because you are Hebrew or Israelite. You shouldn't put that there because we're all Black. But notice that those who understand, you know, like political Islam has been beneficial for those into political Islam. So if we're talking about political Black Judaism, I'm just putting that out there, right? Some people might pick up on it, but if so, work it out, sort it out, right? We see what His Majesty was doing, right, had its roots, right, in a divine, a holy heritage, but the fruits benefit everyone. And even today, much of the fruits, the Gerda Dam and other things, is because of those works of the King of Kings. So here, we're going to seal this up right here for right now. As we speak about and show maps of Africa, we should include, right, I think it's a necessity, right, to include, right, Arabia. Just as I could have showed you some maps where they are showing the Islamic, well, we just show you the other map where you can see the Islamic Arabia. Look how the Arabian influence is there in Africa. And we know that the ancient African influence is there in Arabia all the way up to Babylon. Remember Nimrod? Okay, enough said right there. Right? Son of Cush. So shalom, Chaverim. Shalom. This is Rasiadonis Tefari. This is Yad and Ayadonis Tefari, LOJ, LOJS.org. Check the descriptions, also the podcast and the streaming. Stay tuned. Yes, check out EthiopianWorldFederation.org as well. More to come. We'll put the links. You can see the links, official links on the website, LOJS.org, the official links. Right, because there's a lot of divide and conquer strategies, because this is a big agenda. They've been trying to keep us down for more than 400 years, right? And even if they are not actively doing it, right, we still have to dismantle what they already have done. Shalom, Chaverim, Yeshua Shalom.